Myślę, że pierwszą broń przyprowadziła Tosia Altman i Władka Peltel. Tośmy jej dali pieniądze, ale do tej Tosi Altmanśmy nie znali przecież. To ona była szomerka. A szomrzy to myśmy zawsze ich traktowali takie dzieci, co chodzą z bębenkiem i biją raz, dwa, trzy, cztery, raz, dwa, trzy, cztery.
It was 1943. The streets of Warsaw were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that comes when people are too afraid to breathe. Among the shadows of war, there walked a young woman whose courage defied every expectation. Her name was Tosia Altman. She wasn't a soldier with a rifle, nor a spy with secret gadgets. She was something far more dangerous to the oppressors, a symbol of resistance, armed only with her words, her wits, and an unshakable will to fight for freedom. But this isn't just a story of bravery. It's a story of betrayal, unimaginable risks, and a mission that almost cost her everything. Today, we delve into the life of Tosia Altman, a woman whose actions sparked hope in the darkest of times, and whose legacy remains etched in history. Buckle up, because this is a story that will grip your heart and make you question how far you would go to stand up against tyranny. Tosia Altman was born on August 24, 1918, in Lipno, a small Polish town. The Altman family was modest, middle-class, and deeply rooted in Jewish traditions. But from a young age, Tosia exhibited something rare, an unyielding curiosity about the world, and an insatiable hunger for justice. Her family often said she had a fire in her eyes that never dimmed, no matter the challenges she faced. The environment in Lipno was a blend of cultural richness and simmering tension. Poland, in the aftermath of World War I, was navigating a fragile independence while facing rising anti-Semitism. Tosia's upbringing was shaped by these dual realities, the warmth of her family's love and the harsh whispers of prejudice on the streets. Her parents, avid readers and thinkers, encouraged Tosia and her siblings to pursue education and critical thinking, planting seeds of resilience and independence in their children. As a child, Tosia spent hours reading under the glow of a kerosene lamp, often captivated by stories of courage and defiance. She was particularly drawn to tales of Jewish resilience, stories of perseverance that her grandmother would recount from memory. These narratives were more than bedtime stories. They were lessons in strength and identity. Tosia's father, a tailor, often emphasized the importance of community, reminding his children that their strength lay not just in individual success, but in collective solidarity. The interwar years were a paradox for Poland's Jewish population. On one hand, they experienced a cultural renaissance, with vibrant Yiddish theater, literature, and education flourishing across cities and towns. On the other hand, the undercurrent of anti-Semitism grew stronger, with discriminatory laws and economic boycotts slowly eroding Jewish livelihoods. Tosia, even as a teenager, could sense these growing tensions. She once wrote in her journal, "It feels as though the ground beneath us is shifting, and yet the world turns its gaze elsewhere." As a teenager, Tosia joined the Hashomer Hatzair, a Zionist youth movement that encouraged young Jews to envision a better future. The group focused on community, education, and preparing its members to establish kibbutzim in Palestine. For Tosia, this was more than an extracurricular activity. It became her calling. The values of equality, solidarity, and self-reliance resonated deeply with her. She thrived as a leader, organizing study sessions and inspiring others with her eloquence and passion. By the late 1930s, Tosia had become a prominent figure within the Hashomer Hatzair. She attended leadership training programs and traveled to regional meetings, where her ability to articulate complex ideas with clarity set her apart. Friends often described her as wise beyond her years, a young woman who could debate with professors and console a homesick child with equal grace. It was during this time that she began to realize the power of education as a tool for empowerment, but the winds of change were blowing across Europe. The rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany and the growing influence of fascist ideologies cast a shadow over Poland. Tosia's work within Hashomer Hatzair took on a new urgency. She began incorporating lessons on self-defense and survival tactics into her group's activities, preparing them for an uncertain future. Her foresight would prove invaluable. In September 1939, a massive invasion struck Poland, launching World War II. The speed and ferocity of the invasion were unlike anything Poland had experienced before. Bombs rained down on cities, and columns of tanks crushed any resistance. Within weeks, Warsaw fell, and Poland was divided between the invaders. For the Jewish population, the occupation marked the beginning of a nightmare. The regime quickly implemented anti-Jewish decrees. Jewish businesses were confiscated, synagogues were burned, and families were forced to wear yellow stars as markers of their identity. In Lipno, the Altman family's modest home became a symbol of resilience. Tosia's parents refused to succumb to despair, turning their living room into a gathering space for neighbors seeking solace and support. Tosia, however, knew that hope alone would not be enough. Determined to resist, Tosia relocated to Warsaw, the epicenter of Jewish life in Poland. The city's Jewish population, once a vibrant community of over 350,000, now faced persecution and isolation. The occupiers established the Warsaw Ghetto in 1940, confining Jews to a walled-off area where starvation and disease ran rampant. For Tosia, the ghetto was both a prison and a battlefield. Within the confines of the ghetto, Tosia's leadership shone brighter than ever. She joined the underground resistance, using her skills as a communicator and organizer to rally others. Her involvement with the Hashomer Hatzair gave her access to a network of like-minded individuals who shared her vision of defiance. Together, they worked to establish secret schools, distribute food, and spread information about the atrocities occurring beyond the ghetto walls. Tosia's role as a courier was one of the most dangerous. She frequently left the ghetto, disguised as a Polish factory worker or student, to deliver messages, gather intelligence, and smuggle supplies. Her mastery of the Polish language and her forged papers allowed her to blend in, but every journey was fraught with peril. Checkpoints manned by German soldiers were a constant threat, and a single mistake could mean execution. Despite the risks, Tosia never hesitated. She often said, "If not us, then who? If not now, then when?" One of her most daring missions involved smuggling blueprints of the ghetto's layout to members of the Polish resistance. These documents provided crucial insights into operations, enabling the resistance to plan more effective strategies. Tosia's courage and resourcefulness earned her the respect of her peers and the admiration of those who heard her story. By 1941, Tosia had become a symbol of hope within the ghetto. Her tireless efforts to uplift others, even in the face of unimaginable suffering, were a testament to her character. She organized clandestine gatherings where she shared stories of Jewish resilience and survival, reminding her community that their spirit could not be broken. "They can take our homes, our possessions, even our lives," she once said, "but they cannot take our will to fight." As the war intensified, so did Tosia's resolve. She began collaborating with other resistance groups, including the Jewish Combat Organization, WW2, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most significant acts of defiance during the Holocaust. For Tosia, the fight was not just about survival, it was about preserving the dignity and humanity of her people. The Warsaw Ghetto had become an explosive pressure cooker of defiance and despair. By 1942, the situation had reached its breaking point. News of mass deportations had filtered into the ghetto through clandestine channels, revealing the horrifying reality awaiting those forcibly removed. Tosia Altman, along with other leaders in the underground resistance, knew that the time for passive survival was over. They had to fight back. Tosia's role in the Jewish Combat Organization, WW2, solidified her as a linchpin of the resistance. She worked tirelessly to inspire unity among disparate factions within the ghetto, advocating for cooperation between various political groups that historically mistrusted one another. "This is not the time for division," she insisted at one critical meeting. "We face a shared enemy. If we stand together, we have a chance." The EOB began gathering weapons in secret. Ammunition was scarce, and firearms were nearly impossible to obtain. Yet through sheer determination and ingenuity, Tosia and her comrades smuggled pistols, grenades, and other materials into the ghetto. Each weapon represented hope, a chance to strike back, however small. Tosia herself, often disguised as a Polish civilian to transport these deadly supplies, her heart pounding at every checkpoint she passed. In January 1943, the first significant act of armed resistance occurred when members of the WW2 ambushed enemy forces, attempting to deport more residents from the ghetto. Tosia, though not on the front lines of this skirmish, played an essential role in coordinating the fighters and ensuring their strategies were sound. The resistance fighters' success, though temporary, marked a turning point. For the first time, those imprisoned in the ghetto realized that resistance was possible. The ultimate confrontation came in April 1943, when forces launched a full-scale operation to liquidate the Warsaw Ghetto entirely. The job, numbering fewer than 1,000 fighters, stood against a vastly superior force equipped with tanks, artillery, and overwhelming manpower. It was a battle of David versus Goliath, but Tosia and her comrades were undeterred. Fighters prepared by building barricades and booby traps throughout the ghetto's streets. They used knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, turning alleyways into choke points and rooftops into vantage points. When the attack began on April 19th, the eve of Passover, fighters launched a coordinated ambush. Homemade bombs and Molotov cocktails rained down, halting the advance of armored vehicles and sowing chaos among the enemy. Tosia played a pivotal role behind the scenes, moving between bunkers to deliver messages, boost morale, and ensure supplies reached fighters. In one instance, she led a group of fighters through the labyrinthine sewer system to evade capture, her calm guidance a lifeline in the pitch-black tunnels. For nearly a month, the ghetto became a battleground. Fighters, though outgunned and outnumbered, displayed unmatched bravery. They refused to surrender, even as buildings were set ablaze and the ghetto became an inferno. Tosia's resilience became a symbol of defiance, her actions inspiring those around her to keep fighting. As the uprising wore on, losses mounted. The fighters' supplies dwindled, and the overwhelming force of the enemy began to take its toll. Despite the inevitable, Tosia remained steadfast, rallying those who could still fight and ensuring the stories of their resistance would endure. She once said, "Even if we fall, the world must know we fought with everything we had." By May 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising had come to its brutal conclusion. The ghetto, once a hub of vibrant life, was now a wasteland of rubble and ash. Yet the spirit of resistance had not been extinguished. Tosia Altman, a leader who had become synonymous with courage and resolve, had narrowly escaped the inferno. But her journey was far from over. Emerging from the sewers that had served as lifelines for the fighters, Tosia entered the Aryan side of Warsaw. The world she stepped into was no less perilous. The city was riddled with informants, and each step she took was shadowed by the risk of betrayal. Tosia, however, carried with her something more powerful than fear, the unrelenting determination to ensure the story of the uprising was told. Tosia sought refuge in a series of safe houses, coordinated by the underground resistance. These sanctuaries were havens of humanity amid the pervasive brutality of war. Despite her injuries and exhaustion, Tosia refused to rest. She immediately began documenting the events of the uprising. Her accounts were vivid and detailed, capturing the bravery of her comrades and the overwhelming force they had faced. These documents became invaluable to the resistance, serving both as historical records and as rallying cries for continued defiance. Her reports were smuggled out of Warsaw, reaching not only the Polish resistance, but also sympathetic allies abroad. Each word she wrote carried the weight of those who had fought and fallen. She detailed the fighters' ingenuity, their ability to create barricades from rubble, and their relentless spirit despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Her work ensured that the sacrifices made in the ghetto would not be forgotten. Tosia's life in hiding was a constant battle against despair and danger. The Gestapo's presence in Warsaw was growing, and they were relentless in their hunt for members of the resistance. Despite the ever-present threat, Tosia continued her work. She collaborated with surviving members of the Jewish Combat Organization, strategizing ways to support the broader resistance movement. In late May 1943, Tosia's mission came to an abrupt and tragic end. Betrayed by an informant, she was discovered in one of the safe houses. The raid was swift and brutal. Tosia, weakened by weeks of relentless effort, was captured. Even in captivity, she remained defiant. Witnesses later recounted how she refused to provide any information that could endanger her comrades. Tosia's injuries from the raid and the conditions of her imprisonment proved fatal. On May 26, 1943, she succumbed to her wounds. Her death marked the loss of one of the resistance's most formidable leaders, but her legacy was already firmly established. Through her bravery and sacrifice, Tosia had become a symbol of defiance against oppression. Tosia Altman's story did not end with her death. In the decades that followed, her actions and those of her comrades in the Warsaw Ghetto uprising became cornerstones of remembrance and inspiration. Tosia's life was a testament to the power of courage in the face of overwhelming adversity, and her legacy has continued to resonate across generations. After the war, survivors of the uprising and members of the resistance worked tirelessly to ensure that the story of the Warsaw Ghetto was preserved. Tosia's name was often spoken with reverence, her contributions celebrated as pivotal to the resistance effort. Memorials were erected, and her story became a key part of Holocaust education, ensuring that the sacrifices made within the ghetto walls would not be forgotten. Tosia's writings, smuggled out during the war, played a crucial role in shaping the historical narrative of the uprising. Her detailed accounts offered an unflinching look at the horrors of life in the ghetto, the ingenuity of the fighters, and the moral courage it took to stand against tyranny. These documents became invaluable to historians, shedding light on the resilience of those who refused to be silenced. In Poland and around the world, Tosia's story has been honored in various ways. Streets and schools have been named after her, and her life has been the subject of books, documentaries, and theatrical productions. These tributes serve not only to commemorate her bravery, but also to remind future generations of the importance of resistance against injustice. One of the most profound aspects of Tosia's legacy is the way her story continues to inspire acts of courage and activism. Her life serves as a powerful example of how ordinary individuals can make extraordinary sacrifices for the greater good. Her refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of unimaginable odds, has become a beacon for those who fight for justice in their own time. Each year, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, her name is read alongside those of other heroes who resisted oppression. In Warsaw, at the site of the former ghetto, people gather to honor the memory of Tosia and her comrades. The ceremony is both a tribute and a call to action, urging the world to remember the past and to stand against the forces of hatred and intolerance. Tosia Altman's story is more than a chapter in history. It is a legacy of hope, courage, and the enduring human spirit. Her life reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will rise to defend the light. And as long as her story is told, the flame of her resistance will never be extinguished.